All right, guys, welcome back to another podcast. Today, we're going to talk about accountability and how that plays into the Tier 3 of our growth plan. We have another special guest with us today, so here, stay tuned.
Welcome to the PAWCast.
Today, we're back again, like I said in the intro. We're going to talk about kind of like the different ways that accountability all plays into Tier 3, because, again, this is part of our education system. But today, to welcome Annie Falkowski.
Thanks.
Welcome. Yes.
We've said a lot of good things about Annie in the last 100 hours or however long we've been doing this.
Yes. Yeah. I think we repeatedly say all the time about how we don't have an office manager. It just doesn't exist. And I think talking about the role of sort of senior accountability officer, which personally I love the title. I wish I could have it. I just need that title.
And we're all glad you don't have it.
No, I'm terrible at it. It'd be trash. So, I think we wear the shoes very well. But right now we're right in the beginning of our basically looking at the diagram we have for Tier 3. We're into our fall verbals, which now you're starting to schedule out.
Yeah. So we kick those off starting this week. It's typically about a 2 to 3 week process to kind of get everyone in and through, their reviews. With being the fall verbal reviews, there still is a written component to it, but a lot of it is just establishing accountability as far as where they have come from their written reviews in the spring. So it's kind of a touch point to be like, okay, here's kind of the plan we had set forward for you. Now where are we sitting at 6 months later? Mm-hmm. Did we achieve those goals? Yes or no? If the answer is no, okay, what more steps do we need to put in place so that we can get those by the next review time?
Yeah, and this was, I think, maybe it was last week or whatever. We had talked about how this was like really among all the things that we had starting out several years ago. It was like the first. It was like before there was even an education system, before there was really any skills rubrics or any of that kind of stuff. It's like this was really the basis. And I think back then it seemed like that was all we needed. At the time, and I think because the infrastructure, again, look at the state of the affairs of the profession, it's almost exclusively peer reviews. That's the standard that we have to judge one another, quote unquote judge. But for us to say, oh, well, we're just going to kind of change that system up a little bit and make that system a little bit better, it's like, oh, clearly that's not enough. Hence our 4-tier program. And I think one of the things I was talking with one of the doctors about today was kind of like when you look at this in the moment accountability, to spread it out over saying, well, between our long-term goals, which is our interest list, to come into Tier 3 growth plan, which is still kind of this twice a year type metric for accountability, to then now coning it down into our skills rubric, which talks more about individual skill sets for your job, and of course the 515s, which kind of mirror that for administrative employees, to then in the moment accountability. And I think, again, I think what a lot of people are challenged with in some regard is that they wait for these reviews to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That comes up often enough where it's like, well, what's my next step? And it's like, okay, well, we've identified areas for growth, but the other part of it is, where else do you want to grow? Yeah. So, like, there's within the skills rubric, yes, we've identified some things, but then looking out at the interest list, what else do you want to do?
Yeah. And even I think getting down into all those little pieces to that, like, individual in the moment assessment, that's all self-reflection. Mm-hmm. Honestly, how did I do today? How did I do with that case? How did I do culturally? How did I do with my other team members? And I think that's where when we find some of those really accountable employees, I think I've liked to see that come through more, where they're just like, I don't think I'm doing this part well. It's not like they're waiting until October to say, I don't think I did this well 6 months ago.
But I don't remember what I didn't do well.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a skill set that is limited, to say the least. Yeah. To have that thought in the moment, right? Yeah. Of self-reflection and having that was the whole idea years ago behind this thing, is setting your scheduled points so that you can continue to fill in the middle between the scheduled points. Yeah. Not because, again, like we've said, more times than I can probably count, nothing new really is covered in a performance review.
Shouldn't.
It shouldn't be, unless it's really, again, like considering time frame, it's potential, but it's not by design.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that then turns into that continuous in the moment accountability, or just more consistent touch points, because then you avoid your surprises.
Yeah.
But the continuous accountability is where the skill set comes into play, and you're actually not hoping people get or have the skill set. You're teaching them to actually how to obtain it, because it's thin to have that self-reflection as a general rule. If you hire somebody expecting them to have that, prepare to be disappointed.
Yeah. We had actually we were just going through a kind of conversation on a performance review that you had done here within the last week, about how, like, when we have people who do individual self-assessments and their self-assessment is so very high, and then like we collectively come on to kind of a growth plan where we've identified more opportunities for growth, and that doesn't match between those two employees. Part of it, like you said, in teaching the skill set, part of it is like actually just teaching the process, where it's like, this isn't one of these like sort of like government standardized raised processes where it's like, I'm going to say I'm doing really good because then I can negotiate a higher wage. It's like, no, we're actually legitimately just trying to find opportunity to make you better. Like the raise thing is the raise thing, but I mean, really the bigger part is to sort of gain that fulfillment from skill set. But I mean, you've done far more growth plans than anyone here at the table, but I guess, between kind of our 3 points, the role effectiveness, the core value, and then the new one we kind of added was time allocation and usage. But I mean, do you have in that disparity sort of between sort of people's individual assessments and then sort of their, our assessments of them, is there a common point where you see like there's often, I'm always going to have a disparity between these points, or is it kind of individual specific?
Usually it's individual specific, because we do have employees that kind of fall in all markers of accountability. And again, the idea is just to get everyone into the full realm of accountability. And we have enough tools laid out that they, fall within there. Yeah. But like Sarai is a fantastic example. So by far, her performance reviews are the most refreshing to go through, because she has a little notebook that she jots down at the end of every week, and she recaps it at the end of every month.
Yeah,
and it's like,
that.
I wasn't doing so well on this one specific task. I'm going to focus on it. And it's one of the things that has pushed her further in her role to being now a very effective CBT, because she pushed herself through those sticky points. Yeah,
it's in the moment. And actually, she is, I think, one of our more recent examples when we kind of talk about the performance and potential grid that we kind of talked about last week. I think very rapidly through that individual day-to-day, moment-to-moment self-assessment process, I think she's jumped up to a star player. Yeah. I mean, I think her performance and her potential has remained high. I mean, and again, it doesn't mean that it's not a rubber band, where it's like sometimes good, sometimes bad. Because at any one time, there's the core value component and the role effectiveness. And when you have add-on roles, I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to fail and succeed. But no, I agree. I think that's wonderful to have that level of like self-reflection constantly.
Right.
Yep.
And talk about an absolute asset to have like at her disposal too, right? Because then you have a moment where it's like, 3 months ago you made this mistake that we just found. Well, I'm glad it was actually you that made the mistake, because now you can put it in your book, and I know that you're not going to make it again, right? Like if it was somebody else that you have a struggle with in terms of accountability, or like performance reviews tend to be more of a nuisance because they don't really have much in terms of a growth plan or something like that. If you identify a significant error, it's like, damn it, I don't want to deal with this. But you give it to somebody who's like ready, willing, and able to actually handle it. It's like that. Refreshing is a very, very good adjective to use in that, because it's actually nice to see somebody that wants to get better.
Yeah. I think Ben talks about the war of attrition, a lot, and I think one of the daily, I think one of the things that I think can be very scary to veterinary owners, to managers, to administration, whatever it happens to be, is that loss of employee. And I think loss is both ways, right? So you offboard them or they offboard themselves, either way. I guess I would speak to that, at least in some capacity from your perspective. Like, is there still ongoing fear in the loss of unaccountable employees?
not so much from my perspective. I think we've done this enough times that it's like, if we're going to have an employee that's unaccountable, we're just not the place for them. And that's okay. There's other places that they can go. But if you're going to be accountable, we're the place for you, because we can provide you the most advantages to move forward in your career.
Yeah, and that's I'm glad you put it that way, because it still comes back to what they want to do with their lives. You know, it's you're not fitting into this like bubble of a policy or procedure where it's like you have to be what we say in our book. It's actually latitude to maintain that individuality.
Right.
But yeah, I think, you know,
and along those lines, when we do have a loss, I think one fear that we always come back to as an industry is, if we lose that employee, what does that do to the rest of the team? Because then we have a hole in these hours or days or the schedule. And what we have found is, you know, most of the time, either we have administration step in, so Annie will pick up a large amount of the hours until they can get filled. But we've had instances where we've asked our remaining team members, hey, can we pick up one more shift a month or whatever it may be? And they're willing to step up. And then once that person who was not being accountable is gone, there's almost a sigh of relief.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though everyone has to work a little bit more.
Oh, God, yeah.
There's a sigh of relief, and they are more comfortable in the clinic, more comfortable with what we're doing, because that, like
person's
I said,
gone,
person's gone.
And that's, I think, between what Ben and I talk about, between the two biggest problems in our profession is inefficient process and unnecessary conflict. You know, so you're losing unnecessary conflict, which as a result may make a less efficient process because you don't have someone there to fill the void. However, the inefficiency isn't maintained, you know, for long periods of time. You're going to find someone to fill that slot. You're getting rid of the unnecessary conflict component. And I think that was one of the examples we had from a few weeks ago. It's like we had one unaccountable employee who we now, having listened to episode 17, was really kind of in that iceberg category, the low potential, low performance, who was then affecting other people. And when she was gone, we had two people rise up, you know, at least start to perform better, you know, in that capacity.
That's not an uncommon thing though either. I mean, really, it's the it may be more hours, but they're easier hours.
Right.
Right. Sure.
Like I might have to be here 50 hours instead of 40 hours, but I'm also not going to be stressed for 30 of the 40 or really any at all, because I'm not only having to do my job, but I'm also having to communicate how someone's not doing their job well and then clean up their mess anyways. And like the additional work, it becomes such a nuisance that it's actually way more stressful. And then for us, rather than maintaining poor performance employees and creating other roles around them to try to uplift the bottom, it's like, you just raise the bar, you let the bottom fall off, and then your stars can rise up. It depends on the industry, because that's typically, and this is why politically I stand where I stand, is that tends to happen in government work. They try to raise the basement up, you know, mechanically. I know there's reasons why, but that's what drives me nuts. But we don't do that at all. It's understand where the bar is, which starts day one. It starts at interview of like, this is our standard.
And I think we've written it into process now, because I think of the veterinarians that we've lost over the years, which were good losses. I don't think we've ever had bad loss, but the good losses, you know, there was one that this was before we had even the knowledge of the potential performance chart. It was before we kind of had performance reviews. It was actually right about when we had bought the clinic. But there was a veterinarian who was working with us at that time, and I had made the comment to this individual off the cuff, but it was completely justified for being new owners, but also in the workplace. As I had said, I was like, I need to make a decision between which is worse, me working longer hours and working harder, or having to deal with the shit that you bring to the clinic, you know? And it was like, an individual was like, that is literally the most cold-hearted thing anyone has ever said to me ever. And I was like, but it's true, you know? I mean, and when we say shit, it's not a matter of being ineffective in role, right? Because, I mean, ineffective in role, we can teach if you're willing to learn. We can actually, to some capacity, teach core values and core value alignment. But when there is an absolute heel just stuck into the ground and saying, I'm not going to change any of my core values, I'm only going to be serving myself, and the entire team is going to suffer as a result, that's the balance. Someone's going to have to work harder or drop the bar.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
at the end of it.
And there ain't no time to drop the bar.
No. And that was actually that came up at lunch today too, where the war of attrition, right? So our process, these stop points, because again, you can kind of talk to this as well, but tier 1, 2, 3, 4, coming through tier 1, it's a stop point. Coming into tier 3, it's a stop point. Well, I'm sorry, tier 2, into tier 2, that's 3 months. So if we have a 4 to midnight shift, and that's happening 3 days a week for an employee or 4 days a week for an employee, just as an example, that means if you have employees consistently make it to the 3-month mark and offboard, you can go through 4 in a year. So you have 4 opportunities within a year to find the right fit for that role. That is not what happens in our profession, because it's like, you become what? You become the revolving door practice, But I think the revolving door practice in most settings is a failure of administrative infrastructure. So most of the revolving door you don't want is a revolving door on accountable employees. You want to burn through as many unaccountable employees as possible.
Right. I was gonna, any time that a business has been referred to as a revolving door, in my experience, is not because the bad ones are leaving.
Correct.
It's because the crap one or the good ones leave.
Yes.
Because if you leave. If you keep the crap in, the good go find places where they're appreciated, essentially. And that's when it's like, well, nope, I don't want to be here. Yeah. This is just a shit show. Right.
Which is out. The statistical minority in our profession. That's the unfortunate part, and that's why we are where we are. But that's, I think, when I have a fear of the growth plan process, not because I don't believe in it, but I always, in my mind, it's that knee-jerk, like, industrial type, reaction where I'm just like, oh, we're going to lose good people. And it's like, but you don't. Like, the process supports those people.
It's actually helped because we've been doing this now for a few years now. And what we found is that our accountable employees are helping pull up the younger or newer employees into understanding that a performance review is an opportunity for growth, and that it's not this, reprimand system. Sure. And it's like, no, this is just for you to get better. And so it's really starting to cultivate the culture, like, from day one with these, where it's like, oh, this is someone who's worked here for 5 years. Yeah. And if they like it and enjoy it, that means that it's got to be a good thing. Yeah. Right.
And so we just ran, actually, I don't know if you can see it on camera or not, but we actually still have stuff up from one of our more recent after action reviews that we had done. And actually, to that end, one of our employees, there you go. One of our employees, one is kind of conflict adverse, so that makes it difficult to sort of establish in the moment accountability. But the other side is we had noted that there's sort of an ego marker on the TriCore that is going to make some aspects more difficult to teach. Because and if you can do a better job of describing the ego marker to me.
Right now? Yeah. Implementation becomes difficult with that marker, in my experience. So if you listen to the one where the TriCore review and how 15. We kind of talk through all of the different parts, this is one that I personally have had just struggles with in just trying to figure out how the mindset works there. But the result that I've seen at the very least is that implementation of new ideas, regardless of how effective they likely are, just tends to be either very slow or absent. So when you pair that with conflict aversion, not only do you have fewer difficult conversations, when you have them, picking up the actual results tends to be more difficult. So it can be a difficult thing to have.
Gotcha. You have less, and when you have them, they are less effective.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So and again, we've had conversations about how we don't know how to crack that nut, and saying, how do we kind of have someone become more comfortable with conflict, but then also recognizing that when the difficult conversations occur, it's actually for the intent of improvement or fulfillment. And I guess, or for improvement, yeah. For me, I guess it just in my brain as kind of a test and going through it, I was like, honestly, if we establish purpose and we establish fulfillment with the cause, I think, and we double down on that, I think we're going to start to be able to turn some of those people who maybe aren't necessarily, the conflict part is going to be tough. If you don't like conflict, you don't like conflict, but at least be receptive to those things that come to you. This individual had actually, up to that point, had not, but actually had read through section 1.2, which is, of course, the culture and core value section, and was like, whoa, like I didn't understand it up to this point. I didn't understand that this whole process, like Annie said a moment ago, is a system to find opportunity for growth. I think that was one of the big things. And I think our after action review went relatively well.
Yeah. Long-winded, but it was a big one.
Yeah.
But we definitely got to the bottom of it. And by the end of it, everyone kind of owned their part of the issue. And we were able to set forward some plans to move forward.
Yeah. How many did we?
7. We had 7 different touch points of a single case, and we had 9 people in the room.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think how many.
To-do items?
Yes.
It was at least 25.
Yeah. At least. Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was at least.
Yeah.
And actually, before that after action, we had a couple of employees actually approaching us as well about some of the things some of the high points that actually came out in the after action review. And I think that's why it was so effective, is individually on the small scale, either going to Annie or myself, saying, this particular individual, maybe isn't hitting informed consent as well as we would like or what we had hoped, or when as a medical support staff, we go in to go over an estimate with a caregiver, they don't really know why any of the stuff is on there. So while it's on there, maybe we didn't have. So I think leading up to that point, we're getting these little itty bitty things like, on this case and on that case, and then it was like, all right, here's a perfect opportunity on this after action review to say, like you said, we had 9 people in the room to hit 25 items at the end of it, and it took us 3.5 hours.
It was a long one.
We started at 7? I think we were out of here by like 10:30.
Yeah.
I mean, it was late. I think I was home by 11.
It might have been a little later than that. It was a long one. Either way, though, regardless of how long it took, it was ultimately effective because the goal was to get to the point of solution and not fall down into 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah.
And
on the ladder.
I cannot think of a point in that entire conversation that we fell into anything, especially in terms of blaming or excuses.
No. I think we set that standard pretty well right in the beginning.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was like, here, we all know that this happened.
Yeah, and actually, depending on the wide angle, I mean, up on the wall, we had, just literally section 1.2. I mean, it's not just stuff we use in a PAWCast. Like, we actually do use it in our, process.
Yeah.
But again, I think it went relatively well.
In terms of how do we use that within the mechanical part of tier 3, right?
Sure.
So now we had exposure to 7 individuals involved in the case, 2 facilitators being the 9, but those 7 people, like, now that's just something like, number one, like, the proximity is really nice. Did you get your to-dos done? Right? Like, you just have that be
it was
a
like
part
10
of your
days,
performance
didn't
review.
you?
Yeah.
It was like, it was like, you have 10 days. I'm like, I can't get shit done in 10 days.
You can if you have to.
Yeah, I can if I have to. Yeah, this medical record overhaul thing's kind of killing me. But anyway, moving on.
But it does serve a nice thing because it's not a surprise.
Yes.
It's a very actionable item that's pretty direct, because sometimes our growth plans do get when you have a 6-month goal, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do today.
Yeah.
But that it serves as a great piece to amplify the actual verbal review process too.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. So
Just tuned out there for a second.
No,
I get it.
Yeah, but again, I think it comes back to the
Carlo Riolo listening was your to do.
That was actually the only. I think that was my only to do in the whole list.
Just putting
was
that
just
out
to make
there.
sure that I'm listening.
That applies right now as well.
Right. But no, again, I think you're exactly
I'm
right.
learning so much right now.
Yeah, I know. So nice. But no, again, I think coming back, of course, the intent of being here, at least from accountability and a tier 3 standpoint, no, I think you're exactly right. I think having these opportunities for established in the moment accountability, again, it's the day to day to then have these like 6-month reviews, and it's the opposite of how it's usually run, is there really isn't much day to day. It's just, well, you signed this paper. half a year ago or a year ago if they're only doing once a year reviews. And it's like, how'd you do in the last year? And it's like, I don't know, I've just been pulling hours.
Right. Yeah. I quit thinking about it 2 weeks after the review, and I haven't thought about it since then.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so, you know, I guess
that's the other part of it too, is there's a consistent follow-up on your end, like to make sure that these items are being followed up on by the individuals throughout the course of the 6 months between reviews as well. Yeah. It's not just, hey, go do this, figure it out.
Yeah.
No, like some people cannot handle a 6 month goal.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they need the assist, like especially if they're younger, like the idea of drilling down a 6 month goal into 2 week to-dos. I mean, that was really hard for us to implement, let alone somebody that's like, I'm just trying to become a technician and I don't even know what that means. Right.
Well, and I think one of the things that the employees learn going through this process over and over and over again is how to make that actionable goal, right? So if we have a goal, whatever the 6 month goal is, oftentimes the goal in and of itself is some sort of action. And then there are also smaller actions that need to happen to get to the goal versus I want to learn more about cardiology. That's my goal over the next year, to learn more about cardiology. Well, fantastic. And again, 2 weeks before the next review, it's like, oh, I didn't learn anything about cardiology. maybe I'll go like do some CE real quick online, and then oh yeah, I did this and this and this.
Good job.
Tell me as much as you know about the P wave. What? I don't know.
So
it's the first blip, I think.
Like I said,
I have no idea what a P wave is.
Yeah, it's fine. It's
I could make a definition, but it's not going to be appropriate.
No.
It's twofold in having the conversation, having Annie follow up on the conversation, but then teaching employees how to set goals and make them happen.
Yeah. That is like the basis of why like the office manager position doesn't make any sense in doing performance reviews or even peer reviews. Is it's like, you know, to say Annie's world in accountability is essentially sections 1.1 and 1.2. I mean, that's a huge part of the job. You know, to say that, like you said, the follow-up, like you have to have someone dedicated to that. It's just, I mean, and we run very long hours, and I mean, you know, we lose unaccountable employees. We have to work more, and this gets pushed back. And, you know, I think that's the other thing where when we talk about, I actually had someone ask me after last week's podcast or whatever about like, where are we on the performance potential, you know, grid? Are we constantly star players? Like, are we just high performance, high potential? No, not at all. Like, probably problem children most of the time. like I don't even think if any of us have really
yourself.
Right. Yeah. Right. Has any of us hit? Have we hit backbones yet? I don't know if we have. It doesn't matter. But the thing is that we constantly move between backbone to star player to problem child, you know, I mean, even in that respect. So I think giving that latitude within the growth plan system, it also shows acceptance, you know. It's like I don't know if we're behind on when performance reviews usually go, but I mean, we had material we were finishing even as of this weekend, you know, to make sure we do it right. You know, it may not be on schedule, but when we do it, we're going to be doing it right.
We're gonna hit the end of our deadline. Right, it's the end of November.
Well, and a big part that ties in our performance reviews with you guys talked a lot about the after action report, and we just kind of talked about that as well. Minimizing the like interpersonal conflict that happens when we don't address issues within the clinic, and most of the time that is what a peer review turned into. All of the interpersonal conflicts that have just been bottled up for the last year just get vomited onto a piece of paper and then regurgitated to the person.
Right.
Yep. Which isn't helpful at all.
And it's never anonymous. No. It's always so like situationally specific where it's like, well, you know, I just have this and we got some feedback from other employees. It's like, that bitch said what? You know, like every time. You know, it's like, well, I guess her review's coming up in 3 weeks. I'm going to kill that one, you know. You know, but I guess even to that end, I mean, Annie, what's your take on sort of our overall interpersonal conflict? Like from when you first started to now?
Way down. so much of a more relaxed environment because we've kind of reset that you're here for the patient. Yeah. And so we've taken it off of, winning it for yourself and returning it back. Like, yep, we're all here for the same reason. Yeah. And just keep bringing it back around to that circle. And now everyone's, getting that aspect and understanding, like, the drama just makes it harder. Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. Unnecessary conflict, right? And an efficient process. They all go hand in hand. But it's, the other thing too is I think when we end up getting new employees on, it's a new opportunity to instill that core value or to instill that purpose. They may not take on to it, right. But it's at least another opportunity to support it. And I think that's where we had talked about in PAWCast prior, like, those employees we have who are accountable and are seasoned. I mean, they've been there a while, not necessarily from a tenure standpoint, but they've just been around. They rely upon us to hold true to this process on anyone who comes into the organization as essentially the buffer, and that's where, like you said, it's we're probably having less and less and less opportunity for conflict simply because we have those stop points.
Right.
We have plenty of opportunity. That opportunity just doesn't realize itself.
Yeah, sure.
Because we're able to have professional conversations about what disagreements on what was done, how it was done, when it was done. Yeah. Like that's what our disagreements are about. We never get to you're a bad person because you didn't do this.
Right.
Correct.
We never disagree on why something was done. For the most part, like if that is the issue, then it's much bigger than the one to do that was missed.
Yeah.
But typically it's between the what, the when, and the how. Like that's really it. Which, toot our own horn, I guess. We're not immune to shitty conflict either. It does happen.
Yeah, no.
But it's not the standard.
No.
By any means.
Yeah. And I think even if you end up having that, it's just really kind of a loss of in the moment accountability. Yeah. It's not that we don't have the opportunity to regain it at a later time. It just means we lost it then. I think and that's just, essentially coming back.
Well, and the reason we can have in the moment accountability is typically we don't disagree on why something was done the way it was done. Like serve the patient.
Right.
Like, we can always go back to that. And when you have that shared purpose, we talked about it a couple months ago, it's like, as long as we have this, like I can have a more difficult conversation with you as a general rule because we're not going to automatically jump to I'm an asshole and you suck at your job.
Right.
It's just going to be, I just want to figure out how we can do this better next time. That's
it. And that was even looking at this last after action report. I mean, that was our intention. What was our intention? It's like, serve the patient, educate the caregiver, and I think there was fulfill triage up there. That was like the only one we added in, and it was like we were all just sitting here looking at each other like, what other intentions did we have? And it was like, okay, moving on. It was like, right. That's it. And I mean, whether it's because we just say it all the time, so people just have that ingrained in their head, but it's a good thing to have ingrained in your head. They're just, it drives most of the decision-making process.
Well, and that, like, typically when you say like somebody that's conflict averse, they're typically averse to interpersonal conflict. Yeah. They typically don't want someone to look at them and say, I don't like you. Like, they don't want somebody to say, I think you're a bad person. It's like, well, that's different than saying, well, the way that you handled this specific set of variables, I disagree with what you did or how you did it. Like, that's easy to make to-dos off of because it's very tangible versus we're just going to agree to disagree because we just don't like each other anymore.
Right. So I guess one thing I'm curious about a lot of things, but I guess one of the things I'm kind of curious on, because I mean, Annie, obviously in running performance reviews for many years now, but like, I think about, in my mind, in running through a performance review and someone just getting completely blindsided, right? So just having no clue, no idea, like that their performance is as low as it is. Again, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it seems like that was more common earlier, where, rather than how it is now. And I guess, how do you think we solved that problem? And it doesn't have to be,
Right. Yeah, I think because in the beginning, everyone was so rooted in what was done in the past. Because previously, it was peer reviews.
Sure.
And so for the first few that we ran, it was resetting the mindset. Once we go into a review, it's like, I have this list of other things that I want to talk to you about. We're actually not going to talk about this today.
I forgot there was like the whole other, because then they started doing peer reviews on other employees, right?
Yep,
I forgot.
Yep. So it was kind of a shock. It's like, we're actually, thank you, but we're not going to look at this list. I'm just going to talk about you today.
Yes.
Like, we're just going to focus on your performance. And so it was kind of shifting.
That's right, because it would have been a negotiation on a peer review between they hate me, I hate them.
Right.
So let me have my list of shit that I'm mad about.
Let me get mine first so that you can feed this information to the next person. It's like, not actually how this process works.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. So that's out.
I'm really happy I wasn't around for that.
I forgot about that.
I almost forgot about it as well. But we recently had an employee who was unaccountable. It actually was her basic training checkpoint. So she got through tier 1. She got through tier 2. We were doing her written review, and we're kind of going through it. And at the end, she's like, well, I have some other things I want to talk to you about. And at that point, I thought it was like just normal employment stuff. I was like, yeah, sure. What do you got? It turned into a peer review of everyone else. And so I was like, I can't do anything about this now. This was 3 months ago. That person's no longer here.
Right.
I definitely could have helped you 3 months ago.
Right.
And it just, the performance review went like fine. And then it went, into a peer review. And it's like, oh, nope, we're not actually, nope.
Yeah.
And then it probably turned itself around onto, like, if you say, like, you could have done something about this 3 months ago, like, the mindset immediately went to, what did you have control over? Like, you just shifted it right back on them and just said, you know what, we're going to move past that because...
Yeah, you were assigning accountability. Yeah. You were basically not allowing them to be a victim to that process. It's like, you have tools. I'm here to either coach or challenge, but you're going to have to be the creator on this one.
You did section 1.2, like, top to bottom in, like, 3 sentences, probably.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Right.
It's just, no, this is back on you.
You could have said something, that whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That's true. So I guess, and then making that shift, so kind of cutting out a peer review process forced, getting that out of the performance review. I guess then from a blindsided standpoint on their individual reviews, that's one thing that helped. Was there other variables and clarity that you feel like people weren't getting so broadsided by the reviews? Because again, it seems like there's less conflict in reviews now. It seems.
I think the thing that catches employees off guard is the amount of detail we're able to put into their reviews that they didn't know that we knew about. It's like, yes, we did know that. How did you know that?
We do get that a lot. We get that a lot. There was one in the clinic the other day. You had to refund some blood work or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had called into the clinic to talk to the veterinarian about that. And it was like 14 minutes later. And she was like, how fast do you guys know stuff? I'm like, unified leadership team. Like that is how that works. We're all on the same page collectively. That's true. I think people, because we're not always in the clinic all the time. On shift with all these people all the time, but that's the whole thing with the 4 core development team to, having reliable employees and accountable employees that we hear about it.
Yep.
That's such a significant difference between peer reviews and that process though, because like if you're listening to this as a third party and you're not in the middle of this process, like we're getting that information from other people, right?
Yes.
We're getting that quick information from their peers as a review of their performance.
Right. Based on accountability.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
But the reason that it works the way that it does, like I just did it this morning for a couple of our other staff members. It was like, I'm not handling this. Like the growth plan and the performance review process is all Annie's thing. This is just what I'm seeing to help these people move forward.
Yes.
Like it's just about progress. It's not about shitting on people.
Yeah. No.
Well, and I think one of the big, going back to Carlos' question about how did we kind of shift that mindset is if we look at our accountability ladder and when we took that review process and eliminated the basically the peer review part of it, and then that person's ability to say, well, okay, my performance may have been bad, but it's because this and this and this. We automatically took them up a rung in the accountability ladder. Just by like, nope, you can't blame other people. Okay, what's next? And so just that process alone, like I said, starts us climbing up the accountability ladder into more accountable employees.
Right. And I have that accountability, like that is out on the table when I do a review. So that as if I'm going through this and then someone's like, oh, no, blame, nope, there you go. We're here. Hold up. We need to be up here. Let's. We all are in reality with this situation.
Yep.
Right.
That's why these pens are so nice, because they're really loud.
Yes.
So if you hit number 5 or you hit number 3, you get the point across.
Yeah.
It's not because of how they write. It's because of how they sound.
Yeah, if you do that as part of your performance review process where you just have the same accountability ladder, you can see where most of your employees hit and be like, see how the number 6 is all wore away, you know? Like,
we get a lot of own it's.
Yeah, right. It's like my parents' backgammon board. There's like nothing left, you know? It's like they play so much with the damn checkers, it doesn't matter. Wow. So obscure. But anyway, just keep hitting the same thing, like, you know, anyway, employees who made me touch here are no longer here. You know, so, but again, that's right. I think the takeaway, at least for me, from a lot of this is that I'm starting to become less afraid of the war of attrition. You know, it's like I really have been afraid of losing unaccountable employees. But the funny thing was, and that when we kind of talked about the one employee where she was an iceberg and she was affecting the 2 other employees, she left and those 2 went up. Mm-hmm. I still got to come back to it. I love the mindset of taking our core values and turning the purpose into serving yourself. Yes. You know, like that's where like you'll get, and it's kind of what we talked about before about firing the hard worker. Mm-hmm. You know, is that is, I guess, another big part of this is, to speak to the conflict that you would have to engage upon in a performance review with an unaccountable employee. How does that usually go if it's like you're trying your hardest to take them out of the victim role, bring them into a creator, but also bring them up in the accountability ladder to say you're blaming and blaming excuses. I just need you to live in reality to take your part. Mm-hmm. How long would you say in taking an employee where it's clearly obvious that they're maintaining absolute unaccountability and nothing but victimization of themselves? How long would you say from that moment, because it's a test to the fire fast, is how long on average would you say from there to when they either offboard themselves or you offboard them? Like on average, if it's just they are hitting all negative markers on that.
Yeah. It's, a couple of days to maybe a week and a half.
Yeah.
Because you start to just point things out and they see them, they just are unaccountable to it. So like deep down they know, and it's like, I don't know if for them it's like, one, I don't want to acknowledge that I was wrong and try to come back to the team, or the other part is just nope, I'm sticking hard to my answer, but this isn't the place for me.
Yeah. The former actually, I think, is a interesting way that you put that, because that was actually with one of our doctors who had maintained unaccountability for a period of time. That was one of her big concerns when she was making that swing administratively, when we were working with her on her the clarity and her individual, what do we call it, the accountability clarity document or something like that, was saying like she was starting to understand where she was becoming more, or she was understanding how to become more accountable. She was understanding where she was unaccountable, but her concern was whether or not she was going to be able to come back to the team. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, what we then say on the basis of our model is the forgiveness model. That was essentially what I had said to her, was saying, it's going to be a bitch. It's going to be work. It's not going to be easy. You've run the road of unaccountability for however many months or whatever it turned out to be. And you have affected your relationship with some of these other coworkers or employees. But the basis of all of this is forgiveness. First of all, forgive yourself, right? So understand that you had unaccountability and that you're going to be able to forgive yourself and get over it. But more importantly, if you can make that jump into now living in reality and becoming a creator, the other accountable employees embrace you. Like, that's the whole takeaway, and saying, I want to come back to the team. The people who aren't going to accept you are people who are not beset in forgiveness. The people who aren't going to accept you are people who probably in themselves are also unaccountable or won't allow unaccountable behavior. And I guess that should be the other way, but still.
Yes.
I guess, yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, I said that one part backwards, but yes. But again, I think coming back to it, it's kind of interesting that you had said that, because I guess I wouldn't have in most circumstances considered people where you hold up the mirror and show them they're unaccountable, that there would be some ongoing innate fear and reintegration into the team. But the reality is they have to want to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that process being one of the longer ones, because it wasn't 2 days to a week. It was
6 to 8 months.
It was a long time, but it was for all parties involved a massive learning experience.
Yes.
How many tools were made out of that process?
Exactly.
And how many of those tools are available for
Yes.
free use on the internet? Yes. To those that are listening to this.
yes.
The number of man hours that were sunk into just that process that took section 1 from 1 page to 14 was all that.
All of it, yes.
Almost
this
entirely.
one employee with her individual unaccountability led to the massive infrastructure that we have as a result, which has made the company as a whole. She actually at lunch today had made the joke that, we said the leash, right? So for me, I know when to let go of the leash. She said I had a noose. I didn't have a leash around her neck. It was a noose. I was like, yeah, that's right. I'm like, because I wanted to prove that what we had was effective. We didn't have it in writing, but we had it in theory and we had it in practice. But you're exactly right. But a huge part of it.
That was the thing, though, is like once it was in writing, once the reality was set in physical word, and then he swung the 2x4 a little bit. It was like kind of like a flick of a switch because the mindset changed. It went from a defensive thing to this is going to be a difficult process, but I want to grow with it. I just want to improve. And like I came on full time right around that turning point. Where it's like, man, what's the problem?
Right.
What I miss?
That's right. Yeah. You were beginning at the end.
Yes. I mean, not to say that I wasn't a part of the middle also.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
the day-to-day.
Day-to-day, it's a very different exposure. And now, so that process, and the reason that I bring it up, where it's like, use the toolbox, is a ton of work has gone into this. Not in just time, but just effort and just, figuring it out with people, having interpersonal conflict and then bringing it back to effective conflict and then going back into interpersonal and back and forth. Back and forth
and how many times, like we keep saying this too, like how many times have we reprinted the ERT?
A few.
Yeah, a few. Right. Yeah.
Well, and part of that, even, we've talked about how the tier 3 and our review process was one of the first things we kind of laid out on paper. But that's not to say that the process itself hasn't been revised a few times.
That's true.
Well, it all started just as tier 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But she's
like
saying of tier 3 itself has
Yeah.
also undergone revision. Yeah. And actually, I think one of the big things also is the time allocation and usage. As far as the more recent addition to that, because you can have role effectiveness, but I think the time allocation and usage is kind of a little bit of a tip of the hat to people kind of sitting back on their heels. It's like if they got the hours, right? Because for us, that's one of our concerns, right? With administration, middle management, that kind of thing. Is we kind of talk about bullshit jobs. Like our whole intent from with that time allocation and usage, it's the emphasis on efficiency and accuracy. So it's, are you getting the job done and how much time is it taking you? And, are those two things appropriate? Or is it just like, this is my job and these are my hours. So I'm going to slow my performance so that I can, I'll still be just as accurate, but I'm going to pull those hours. That horrifies me. Not just as a business owner, but that horrifies me from a progress standpoint. Because if we have people that have the ability to become more efficient at a particular process, but choose not to do so because they're trying to protect their own job, that is a sinking ship. A stalled ship, maybe not sinking. It's just a stalled ship. Our wagons. You are no longer moving west, and you're not really building a town. You're just,
You're just camping.
Just camping. Exactly. Yep. See, you know what? I really feel like most things in life can be related back to Oregon Trail video game from the 80s. Anyway, keep moving. So,
I never played that.
Okay. You know
There's
what?
a card game out now.
It's brutal.
I own it.
Yeah, we own it.
Yes.
Have you played and or won it?
We haven't gotten to the end.
Yeah, nobody gets to the end. Like, we're going to take a huge tangent here about the Oregon Trail video game. But, for all those who played the Oregon Trail video game back in the day, you never won that one either. Everyone died. And then they come out with this new card game where you're like, oh, this is awesome. I loved that game as a kid. Like, I don't think we even made it like a 10th of the way through the game. And you just keep on dying. And it's like, I hate this card game. It's just as terrible as the fucking video game. It's like, but I'm going to play again. See who gets dysentery.
Do they have the old MS-DOS graphics on the cards too?
Yes.
It's like the original game, just
in
on
card
physical
form. Yes. Well,
Nice.
we will bring a copy and play.
We're going to have to play it on here.
That's fine. We'll do a game.
We're just going to have to put explicit on the title because it's definitely going to be loaded with vulgarity.
Listen, my kids watch tons of people playing video games. There can definitely be a whole channel of just us playing awesome board games. Which also, by the way, Fireball Island. Does anyone remember Fireball Island?
No,
you are dating the hell out of yourself.
God. Any
now.
listener who knows about Fireball Island, they came out with a Kickstarter. There's like 4 different expansions. We own it, by the way. It's in the garage. You may not know we have it, but we do. Anyway.
Details.
Back.
We also just bought a pill counter today, so whatever.
I knew about that.
Yeah, that pill counter is top of the line. So anyway, back to Tier 3 growth plans. So I'm at least allowed one tangent in all of this. And now that everyone is aware that we're going to do a board gaming channel, Ben will have the link in the description.
We're starting with bananagrams.
Remember to
just putting that out
like
there.
and subscribe. Click the like. Okay. All right, so coming back to it. So again, I think we're just talking about how the growth plan itself has evolved over the years and saying, time allocation and usage is kind of a more recent addition. But also, the role effective and core value alignment,
Right.
Those, I would say, even more recently, we kind of split those two things out into saying we need to have equal emphasis. Because even when we go down to like Michigan State or whatever, we talk about the equal emphasis of culture and core values and then role effectiveness. Do you think... maybe I had asked this earlier on, but and I said this is kind of like individual specific, but what do you or have you found that people are faster at improving their core value alignment or their role effectiveness? Like, is it still individual specific, or is there kind of a trend within the employees to say, some, like, it seems like everyone gets core values the fastest, or is there something that lags behind the other?
It's a little bit interesting. So it's individual specific, but I see people where their roles are slacking, so therefore their core values are slacking. Because amongst the team, it's like, how do I trust this person? Because they're really struggling to do their job. Like, I'm constantly playing catch up, and I'm trying to improve their skill set. So once they improve their skill set, the core values follow right along. But then the flip side is if we have an employee that has really understands core values coming into it, but maybe their skill set isn't so great. If they're adhering to those core values, then the team kind of molds to that and is like, oh, well, I can teach you these skills because you're so receptive to them.
I believe that. Yeah, entirely.
And in the event that they are receptive to it and the skill set doesn't pick up, then we find them a place where they can actually thrive. There's an adjustment period in there. Right. Where it's like, well, maybe you do suck at this, and like I don't really know how to teach you how to do it, or I've shown you all the ways I know how to teach it, and it's just not there. Well, maybe you will fit better here. Your core value aligned. You've shown an appreciation and a desire to improve. It just might not happen here. It can happen here, wherever that might be.
Yeah, role A versus role B.
Right.
Yeah, and I think even in that adjustment, maybe not necessarily a change in actual job position, but I think sometimes it's even kind of a shift of hours, on to either increasing weekend exposure, because we still, again, the foundation of the practice is nice weekends and holidays. That's what it has always been. The 24-hour component, if, we have people that work more day shifts in the week, your exposure to process is going to be so much different. And actually, again, as a part of that conversation, I'm kind of shifting my hours a little bit to have more exposure to the daytime crews on Sunday and Monday, since they are higher volume teams, and of course, even come Monday, which is then a weekday, is to still maintain that process so that everyone is sort of getting kind of that same type of training or that same type of exposure. Because even between, obviously, I don't think there's a ton of continuity between doctors.
No.
We probably have I say this loosely because I feel like you and I have a similar outcome, but our process is much different in staff handling. So
you don't have to say that loosely.
Yeah.
It's very different, guys. As a staff person, it's very different.
Yeah, see, but for me, it's all result, right? You know, it's to me, it's the same result. So it's kind of like, she just has a preference to give people stress and anxiety all the time. But I think,
and a compliment here and there.
Right. That's just to.
We're not going to touch that one, though.
No, that was.
Fine.
We've actually, including Katie, we have had a lot of people talk about how we did was talk trash to Katie last week, or about the compliment situation. But anyway, again, coming back to saying maybe we put someone somewhere else, and saying it's, we can teach skill.
I see the potential in everyone.
Yeah.
And just have really, really want them
to
meet that potential.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, that was when we talked about this too. I don't know if it was the last episode or the one before, where it's like everyone starts out as a problem child, right? Like
Ideally.
We don't actually know what their performance level is.
No.
But we only hire people if they're at least of a minimum standard of potential, if not well above it, right?
Yeah.
Like, just show me you might be able to do this. Yeah. So we all walk into the situation like, well, I see you as a star performer at some point, and I'm going to give you 90 days to at least work your way closer to it. And then, or even more so, right? Just show me advancement up in performance.
Yeah.
And then, like, at some point, we want everyone to be there. We don't want to see potential go down. It's not impossible. You might realize, like, well, actually, potential was a little bit lower, but their performance is really high, so I'm not going to get rid of them. Like, they're a backbone. Backbones are necessary to every business.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you always start high and without actually realizing what performance is, because it is a guess.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Tier 0 can only get you so far.
Yeah.
You just kind of got to kick them to the wolves a little
I think
bit.
ours goes further than most other businesses. I don't know about clinics in general, but the idea of a working interview, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to come and watch me do this job for 8 hours.
Yeah.
You're not going to touch anything.
Yeah.
You're going to ask 100 questions, and you're just going to see what it is. Hopefully, it's either a night, weekend, or a holiday,
right?
Yep.
Because then you're really going to see what it is.
Yeah.
And
they're specifically scheduled for a night or a weekend,
Exactly.
so they can experience the busiest time, the most stressful time,
and that exposure to me, like it's more than just like, all right, well, I like you, so now we're just gonna start to onboard you. It's like, no, you're gonna come see this, and you're gonna decide if you want to go through onboarding, because conceptually this sounds great. Annie's seen it. I'm a great hype man in an interview. I want everyone to work at PAW because I think it's great. But sometimes that needs to be curbed by actually seeing the role.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I guess in terms of covering the specific mechanisms within Tier 3, as we can kind of wrap these ideas up, right? We can talk about the 3 and kind of how they integrate into both our written and our verbals for our specifically scheduled performance reviews throughout the year. So role effectiveness is essentially revolved around, and this is for everyone that's listening.
Going through the packet. Yep.
Yeah, this is what we use is currently extremely new, like weeks new.
I mean, we finished the skills rubric a few days ago.
Yeah, we can count the hours if we really had
really
to.
Could, yep.
But I'm very proud of the skills rubric. I think
we've had it for a while,
yes,
but it was on a mentorship level. That was different.
Yep.
So we shifted it, and now it's staff related to, depending on the role, especially like a technician, there's probably 50 criteria in there of like, this is how you do it extremely well. Where do you rate? As it real, do we still have a 1 to 5 on that?
Still do. Yep.
Yeah.
And then what were your 4 A words?
Oh yeah,
this is your test because you changed my words.
Let's see here. So the first one is going to be acknowledge. So that's going to be more similar to your tier 1 acknowledgement, where it's like just, especially from role effectiveness or core values, the acknowledge is, hey, just respect that these things exist. Respect that we have core values. Respect that we have people that do this job very, very well, and just acknowledge that it's there. The second one is aspire. So aspire is going to be a little bit more similar to tier 2, where it's say, hey, in this amount of time, at least try to do this. And then the third one, it wasn't obtain. No, that's O.
Attain?
Yeah, attain. Is that what it was?
I don't know.
Yeah. Why don't you have it up?
Because I'm testing you.
Oh my God.
We're doing it live.
Yeah.
Right now.
So tier 3 was essentially having the ability to do it, and being able to perform, obviously, within a high level. And then the fourth one, again, relating to tier 4, had to do more with teach it, but it was another A1. Well, you're killing me on this.
I know.
You
because
still haven't brought it up yet?
No, I'm working on it, but I'm doing this to show this is what rapid change looks like, folks. Sometimes you have to trip over your own words.
Right.
and upset Ben and you changing the words that he's used for the last year and a half.
No, it's fine. It was good. But again, coming back to the
That's
logistics.
all right, because we changed the whole tier system, and
Yeah.
Riolo had a little.
That's true. You guys did change the
struggle
tier
with
system
that
on me,
for
and
a
I did
while.
struggle with it, but it's fine. But again, coming back to
Okay. Appreciate,
aspire,
ability,
and
and advise.
advise.
So appreciate is essentially like see it, know it, not necessarily do it, but like just respect it,
Yes.
right? Aspire, show me a desire that you want to do this well.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that you're doing it well, but like just put yourself out there, give it a shot, swing the bat.
Yeah.
Ability, how well do you actually have the innate tools
Yep.
to do this
Yep.
well?
And that's then the growth plan part. Yeah.
And then for advise, can you coach somebody else how to do this?
Yep. In a tier 4, it then comes down to individual advancement or industrial advancement. So it's that way. Then what we do in the skills rubric is to say on this particular skill set, where are you at least in those tiers? We would want most of our tier 2 employees to be at that aspire level on all of those skills. Tier 3, we would like them to be at the ability stage of all of that. But then what it allows us to do is ranking any of those points on a 1 to 5. So if you're a tier 3 employee, but you're at the point of just aspire, and you're not on a 1 to 5, you're on a level 2 of the aspire on this particular skill. It's like, wow, you haven't even shown that you have any interest in doing this in any capacity. So you're not even performing the job to ability that I can even rate you on your ability, because you're not even doing it. So I think it gives us not just a 5 scale, but it's actually a 20 scale, on that, because each of those 4 pieces have 5 ratings to them. But anyway, this all comes down to how we track out role effectiveness and utilizing the skills rubric within the growth plan.
Right.
And it's okay to be less effective at some things and more effective at others, and saying, hey, I'm a tier 3 employee, but the adverse to that is I'm a tier 3 employee, but I have a tier 4 skill set with this particular item, where I am at the point where I can actually teach people this skill, and I'm a high performer in teaching people this skill. But even in that respect, maybe there's something else I'm really not that great at in that list. Right. So you can have people kind of shift on all sides of that skills rubric. And I think that's where we basically then saying the skills rubric to role effectiveness, that's where we play off of each other's strengths. You have some people good at teaching this, some people good at teaching that. They're not good at this, they're not good at that. And you basically just start to merge that team together. And you may have some people who just aren't going to be able to learn parts. And I think that's what you said a few moments ago, is just saying maybe we can find a different place for you or a different role for you. It's this. And saying if someone's really not that good at anesthesia and they're just not going to get that good at anesthesia, but they're fantastic at lab, it's like, oh, we may actually be skewing you more into a position where you have the microscopes, cytologies, all those different parts, and we're going to allow that sort of anesthetic thing to slack because there's someone else on the team who can support you. So that's, I think, when we start to talk about role effectiveness and the growth plan, I think that's where we're going to really start to see the puzzle pieces sort of fitting together on the employee level.
So yeah, we have the actual initial audit assessment portion within the performance review, but then, and we can kind of go down the list here, but to go along with that, we have our growth plan that follows up directly behind it, right? So our growth plans can be kind of two-sided depending on the person, but typically what it is, well, here's where you're missing, here's what we're going to put in front of you to help you do it better. There's also this is what you're doing extremely well, and a part of your growth plan is just continue to do that extremely well because you're actually well above the standard, so don't come down. But that's kind of how those growth plans are built. And then in terms of like, is it resources that you have on there?
Part of the growth plan is identifying the issue or the area of success. The next part is like to-dos to come out of it, because one of the things that we've identified is that people aren't so great at generating their own to-dos. It's like, I know that this is a problem, but I'm really struggling to implement some solutions. So it's like, okay, that's what we're here to help you with.
Right.
So it's giving them some solutions. And then the follow-up is, who are you going to go to?
Yeah.
Who are you going to follow up with?
Sure.
Is this just going to be an individual thing? Do you need to meet with, someone else on the team who's doing really well? Like if you're struggling with anesthesia and you may be exposed to it, we got to at least bring you up to, an average. So I'm going to have you, come to the shelter and, work with some, humane society so that you can really understand.
Higher volume in that one skill or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And that I think, again, is when we start to talk about these growth plans, it's exactly what we talked about with our culture and core values section, is saying just get them to the reality. Like, we just want people in the reality because we can provide solutions. We can help implement those solutions. They don't have to come up with it on their own. But yeah.
Well, and that transitions you straight to the second part of the tier 3 performance reviews, core value alignment. Yep. So you've got the role side, right? That's what are you doing with your hands, basically. Right. And core value is
what are you
more
doing
of
with
the
your mouth.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it, but yes, it is the more intangible. It's what's your attitude, what's your mindset. It's are you serving the patient in the way that is expected by PAW. Yeah. Similar process, right? It's so you've got your Aspire. Nope, I don't have it. I don't have it on memory. Yeah. I'm gonna
Aspires
get there. Appreciate, aspire, ability, and advise. Right, so that still works for core values. Do you show a respect for it? Do you show a desire to do it? Do you have the innate ability? That's going to run pretty directly hand in hand with the tri-core stuff.
Absolutely.
Like, do you have a major barrier essentially to fulfilling this? Yeah. And then are you able to coach people for this one? That's especially on the staff level going to be on a day-to-day basis, right? Yeah. That's are you going to be the person that as they walk into the treatment area upset, are you going to be the one that says serve the patient, educate the caregiver?
Right. Well, yeah, which I mean, even in, having that moment where we had with one of our employees where we kind of had a group that was kind of disparaging her, at least in some capacity, to then have our doctor come out and be like, guys, this ain't right. And if you have a problem, you need to bring it up with administration. It's like, and it was like huge thumbs up, to say that's fantastic that you did that. It's a difficult conversation. It's super awkward, and but at the end of the day, who's going to do that? It's, who's going to turn off a faucet of running water? It's the same thing. Who's going to pick up the trash off the side of the road? It's all these things.
It's a little bit more difficult than turning the faucet off.
I don't know. I don't know that
some
it
days
is,
it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it is for some people, but I think once you get to a point where you've had enough difficult conversations, and those difficult conversations ended with positivity, it makes it's that same hook to then go say, okay, well, when I see it again, I want to do it again because that felt really good because I took these unaccountable people and I made them more accountable, and the ones who were unaccountable, I actually helped get them fired, because they shouldn't have been here.
I made everyone else's life easier.
Yes.
They may have had to work a little bit longer,
right,
but less stressful hours.
Right.
Woo.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's easier.
In terms of those two items, though, Annie, in like the way that your performance reviews operate, like they pretty much just run hand in hand and simultaneously. You don't really segment the two. We just put a focus on them both, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have them listed out with, as individual requirements. So the skills rubric and the core values are all listed out. What we find is they start to overlap. Yeah. So it's like, when we start to run through them, it's like, oh, we actually addressed this in core values in the skills rubric, or in the skills rubric, we actually identified this one in the core values already. So they do run side by side.
So like one of the things that's on the doctor one, I believe would be just communication among the team, right?
Yeah.
Like being the director.
Sure, yeah.
So if we take one of our newer staff people, right? Like that's one of his things that's in his growth plan is actually improving communication.
Right.
So mechanically, it's a part of your job as a doctor to communicate with your staff what's going on. So we have a very mechanical thing of this is what you're supposed to do. Well, then it's the question of why is this happening? Is because what we're seeing is a lapse within core value because trust is being impacted when communication's not happening. Well, why is that happening? Well, it's this indicator right here, which is just the ability part of trust on your tricore, right? You kind of just boil it down. It's like, okay, well, you're root causing essentially, and now it's like, cool. Instead of having, well, just go communicate better, just go talk more. Oh no, we're actually going to put a legitimate resource in front of you, and we're going to start to figure out how to combat the root cause of this problem. So a bunch of the other stuff becomes, at a minimum, way easier, if not remedying itself. So I've never been through a peer review process, but that's like the end of the road in a peer review process is going to be, well, these people said these bad things about you, so please don't do those things.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no, if you have a really phenomenal and just hardcore in it manager, you might get layer 2. But it's so hard to get beyond that because there's no opportunity to really root cause into anything.
Yeah. I think honestly, again, it just comes back to the destruction of culture. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, because it's not like that type of a system really improves unity. No.
Not unless everyone's shitting on the same person in the same way, because then it's just a common enemy.
Right.
Not effective. Right. You're really rolling the dice.
Yeah.
Don't play craps with your culture.
No.
But it's possible.
No.
It's like double sixes.
Yep.
If you're betting on it, you're probably going to lose a lot. But that one time you hit,
right.
Woo,
Yeah.
it's going to feel great.
All right.
Sorry, we're just
we're
being very tangential today.
Yes.
So those two things kind of run hand in hand. And then in terms of the way that your conversations go, how do you integrate time allocation and usage into those conversations?
So this is the newest one that we just implemented.
Yep.
So it was pretty easy, or it has been easy for our staff that's in the clinic because they're just on a schedule.
True.
Like they just have their rotational schedule. Mm-hmm. So for them, it's while I'm here, I work, and I don't have to try to, figure out how I'm doing, but theirs comes back to role effectiveness. Like while you're here, are you being effective in your role?
Right.
When it comes to the new,
I could see where there's a ton of overlap there for shift employees. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Versus our off shift employees, where they're doing other things outside of the clinic or bouncing in and out. We have a new assessment tool, the weekly 515s, where each week they'll be putting together a report for their direct supervisor that says, what am I going to work on this week? What do I anticipate is going to be a challenge? Mm-hmm. And who am I going to talk to get through some of these things? So it really helps them outline what they're going to work on. Mm-hmm. And then the feedback goes the other way, where it's like, actually, we have this higher priority thing that I need you to work on. Yeah. So I'm going to actually shift your schedule. I'm going to make you, let's do this task first, and let's see if we get to this other one. Yeah,
because that'll help, too, with us, at least from a leadership standpoint, having sort of the different hats that we wear. If we have someone who's doing design or whatever it happens to be, and it's like, all right, well, we know that we have these 15 other projects that we have eyes on that this one person does not have eyes on. They're going to have a hard time prioritizing their task because all they're going to see is this one bit. Mm-hmm. But it gives us that metric to say, no, we have all of this. We need you to, like you said, focus your attention, because again, it's kind of the bigger picture type stuff, so we're not locked into the day-to-day, at least exclusively.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there's tools to go with all of those, though.
Yeah.
Like we've hammered core values a lot.
Yes.
The time allocation thing is so new, right? Like I at some point in the very near future, we're going to cover the 515s.
Yep. Sure.
And then role effectiveness, the skills rubric, we're going to have linked.
Yes,
description.
Yes.
Carlo, hint,
yes.
hint, as it is currently not.
Yeah. I get those uploaded.
But really, it's there's tangible tools for all three of these items, and it's just like, all right, just fill it out, sort of. I mean, and then you pair it with really good conversations, going back to kind of where the whole conversation started of like, do we have disagreements on what you're doing, how you're doing it, and when you're doing it?
Right.
It removed the opportunity for interpersonal conflict almost entirely. So I think it's pretty cool myself.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
This was one of the big factors in my decision-making process to want to come be a part of this team, right? Because, well, and before we go too far, it's like I've seen, I can think of 5 that I was like in the middle of performance review processes. One was straight peer review, where it was like 2 people every month because they had 24 employees. So they all got done on the 30th, including February. And never worked. Never, ever, ever worked.
That sounds terrible, to just be in that constant cycle.
Yeah. Wow. So there was like 2 people that would say like one nice thing, and that was all they ever said about like everybody. It was like the same thing, like good person. Yeah. But then there was the 2 people that also contributed that just like shit on everybody. Yeah. So highly ineffective. And like, not that I was thinking about being a part of that experience. Yeah. It's like, I don't want that. Yeah. Right. And then another one that I can think of offhand was an individual who had 0 exposure to the staff that they were providing feedback for. Sure. And actually never really like obtained information. It was just like, well, this is what I think is going on. What? Oh yeah. This is a very real thing. And would execute all the performance reviews for 100 people. What? Yeah. Like sounds 0 exposure to their actual work life, and like was just taking in the minor bit of feedback that they were getting from shift managers once every couple weeks at best. That was the whole thing. So what the project was, though, was their original request was to create a form that was so inclusive that these managers, because they don't want to change their process, would actually execute effective performance reviews, even though the process was busted. Sure. Yes. Sure. This is a very real thing. And I'm telling you, if you're listening to this and you're like, that sounds like mine, stop. Yes. Stop now. Yeah. If you're doing either of those things, because it's just not effective. No. Because this whole process is tell people what you expect of them, how efficient you need it to be, and then teach them how to do it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So. No, entirely. And I think, again, for me, it all comes back, and we keep making the joke about the toolbox. Like, it's just a tool. Like, and that's why I said we've had this all from the very beginning. It's just finally in writing. But the foundation of culture and core values, this is just a way in which you create a metric on it. Yes. Role effectiveness. This is just a way in which you create a metric on it. But it's like it's there in the clinic as a very real, tangible thing. Mm-hmm. And that was actually, again, part of the conversation I had with one of our vets today is it's like you should be able to get to a point where you don't actually require a growth plan, that you don't actually require all the skills rubric, all these different tools. Now, I'm not saying you can't utilize the skills rubric as individual assessment. Yes, please do. But you should get to that point where not only do you have the mindset of long-term interest in long-term goals, but you've been coached and you've been taught into the mindset that you can function in day-to-day accountability to achieve your long-term goals with this type of a system. So for us as administration, like I think, again, for me, it had always been there as sort of like the sort of like nice cozy part of our clinic where it's like, hey, let's all work together, learn together, and make everyone better. Not everyone fit into that. But again, that was the mindset. It's just with the written word here, it's like you don't want to get lost in the details. You want to come back to just saying, no, it's see it and do it and teach it and make us all better. This is just the structure by which we're going to achieve that. Mm-hmm. I've told Annie on a few occasions, and it's probably come up in conversation otherwise too, but for a long time, my favorite way of thinking about performance reviews is if you can't do it on a blank piece of paper, are you really doing it all that well? And you and I had talked about that not that long ago, right? And with kind of the way that this is built, the cool part about it is you probably could. you probably could just go in with a blank piece of paper because conceptually it's built, it's constructed, you know it well, and everything functions well, right? But having structure allows other people to feed into the process just as well.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that was missing in that long growth plan process, right? Was just give me the physical structure, because you might have it up here, and you've probably experienced this more than any of us put together, where it's like you have it up top, but people aren't realizing it when you're trying to direct them on it.
Yes.
I think the way that you had worded it was just or what was when it was the strategy thing,
right?
The first strategy meeting, one of the first ones was like, well, what do we do first? All of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
What are we going to do? Fix it.
And that doesn't work
Yeah.
for most people. So having something like this.
And then he was like, why not?
Right.
Oh, I don't know.
There was a
Time.
there was an argument with him on.
Yeah. That was then what led into me having to leave the room.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Because my answer was just, we're doing all of it at once. It's like, that's not attainable. I'm like, it can be.
There's plenty of hours
Yeah.
in the day. I don't need sleep.
Right. See, I was just 5 years ahead. I just knew being here now and having all of us do this. That's what I meant. You should have known that.
It was implied.
We're here. I had the vision. This is what I thought in the very
my
beginning.
God.
So
All right.
Sure.
I think in terms of the staff side of tier 3, it's pretty much I think we've covered all of our bases. Did
Yeah.
we miss anything?
Yeah.
I mean, you're the one that does all of this.
Nah, I think, bringing it back to the team, like they've been fantastic in, moving through all the processes and changes that we've had within the growth system, specifically within tier 3 when we started talking about performance reviews, and they're going to be twice a year, and, we're cutting out peer reviews. We're only talking about you specifically in your performance. Now we're adding in the skills rubric. It's just been nice to have the team that we have that's receptive to all that information.
Yeah.
Where they're actually now like thankful for the tools that we have, where it's like, oh, this is so much clearer.
yeah.
So now it's like giving them all the clarity so that they can just move forward with it.
Yeah. Go team.
Go
Great.
I love it. Go us.
all those hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Hours and hours and hours worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just for the one Katie compliment.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bringing it back.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think we'll end there today.
Thank y'all for tuning in. We'll cover 515s next week. You can teach me about it because I still have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
But we're gonna learn.
Yeah. I hope we can string it out to a whole hour. But
that's not hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Sorry,
See
guys.
y'all- see you guys next week.
See you next week.